So alongside Ereshkigal, we also have Ishtar going up on rate up over on the JP version of the game. And like Ereshkigal, she's just one of those generically very good servants. It's not like Ishtar does anything super special. I mean, she has a nice, unique third skill, that's for sure, but she's not really limited like a lot of other servants into like you have to bring her against a certain enemy type. Ishtar is just one of those servants you can bring to fight anybody and everybody, and she's pretty much just going to dominate in any scenario that she's in because Ishtar is one of those servants that I would say is built pretty much perfectly. Aside from some oddities on her second skill, there's pretty much nothing I have gripes with on this servant. So before we even really get into discussing how good Ishtar is, if you want to summon for Ishtar, I think this banner is very, very strong. If you are missing just a strong archer in general, Ishtar is not a bad servant to go for, which is probably reassuring for a lot of people because I know there are a lot of Rin fans out there. So being told that not only can they go for their waifu character, but that she's also really good is probably very reassuring. Then again, I'm sure people would be going for her anyway considering how popular Rin is as a character, but you know, it's just kind of nice that she's also really strong. So we're going to talk about Ishtar in today's video, but before we do, if you have not already, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel as it helps me out more than you know. If you want a free way to support the channel, I'm affiliated by all means with LD Emulator and Loot Cakes, linked down in the description down below. I also stream every weekday over on my Twitch, which is linked down in the description down below as well. And if you want bonus content, you can click that join button to become a channel member and gain access to that. Now, with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into this video, starting off with Ishtar's hits, which I would say for a year 1 servant, she has some very, very strong hits. They didn't prioritize giving her the weird quick card thing like they did for Ereshkigal. They just went straight into giving her the double arts double buster deck. So double buster so she can do buster brave chains with her NP and do big busty crit damage. And then the double arts cards are supposed to help her also gen her NP, although Ishtar does have something in the back pocket if you're having a hard time genning her NP, because unfortunately her NP gain is a little on the lower side at 0.45%, which means she's going to be very reliant on getting crits with her arts cards, although thankfully her arts cards are extremely powerful with 4 hits each. Meaning that she might have some low natural NP gain, but when you get those crits on those arts cards, you are really going to be feeling the effect of having 4 hits on them. And then if that all wasn't just good and fine and dandy enough, they also give her a 7-hit extra attack, which you guys know I love to see that around here. If you guys don't know, the extra attack is basically a composite card that gen stars NP and does big boy damage. Unfortunately, since the extra attack cannot crit, it is very reliant on your natural NP gain and star genning values, and Ishtar's for both are a little on the lower side. So unless you take the time to buff up her append skill to give her that 50% buff to her extra attack's efficiency, you're really not going to be feeling the all-powerful, omnipotent power of the extra attack, but it is there. So overall, the thing you should take away from Ishtar is that she is able to do Buster Brave Chains with her NP, which is very important as a Buster servant, and you really want to prioritize getting crits on her arts cards, which actually isn't all that hard to do, as we'll talk about in this video. Starting off with her skills, you have a very strong start to this servant, as she has an extremely powerful charisma that gives the entire party 20% attack for 3 turns, and also gives the entire party 20% crit damage for 3 turns, although for Ishtar herself, she actually has 30% crit damage because of her independent action skill. That actually gives her a passive 10% buff to her crit damage, so realistically for Ishtar, this is a 20% attack buff and a 30% crit damage buff, which 30% crit damage for 3 turns isn't the most insane thing. Generally, you see 50% crit damage on a 3-turn cooldown, and then when you get up to like 100% crit damage, it's generally limited in some way to being like, it has to be quick crit damage, or it only lasts for 3 attacks. It's not just for 3 turns flat out. But considering she is a year 1 servant, I'll give her a bit of a pass on that one, as it's still fairly good. Like 30% crit damage is still passable to get along, especially with everything else she does in her kit. And then also you got to consider that it's probably limited down to 20% of the whole party because, well, it's a party-wide skill buff. And as we'll talk about with her next skill, she actually pairs very well with someone like Ozymandias, because Ishtar and Ozymandias both exchange buffs to one another that both of them want. So this is already a very strong opening for the servant. But then you look at her second skill, which gives her a 50% battery, which is absolutely insane. We just talked about this in the Ereshkigal video. Having your own natural 50% battery, no a pen skill 30% battery nonsense needed, makes you extremely viable in the Koyanskaya meta. In fact, those are the servants that Koyanskaya wants to be partnered with the most. So having this natural 50% battery is absolutely insane for Ishtar. And if that's all this skill did, it would be pretty much good enough as is. But then it comes with two separate 80% chances to give her self-invincibility for a turn and to give her pierce invincibility for a turn. Now, this is actually why someone like Ozymandias and Ishtar pair very well together, because while Ishtar's giving him attack buffs and extra crit damage, which is stuff that Ozymandias wants to kind of complete his own kit, Ozymandias gives her buff success rate, meaning you can guarantee her invincibility and you can guarantee her pierce invincibility as well, which just makes her an insanely strong servant, because already it's a 4 out of 5 chance, 80%, which is pretty good odds, but you want to be able to guarantee it for when you need it, because giving her an invincibility means she has very strong survivability, and then the pierce invincibility means that she can get around any dodges, invincibilities that the enemy sets up, and it just makes her a far more effective DPS servant, because it basically means she can play the game without having to really care about any of their defensive buffs, aside from things like just massive amounts of raw defense or some weird special damage reduction damage mod that the enemy might have for like some of those specific bosses. But it's a very strong buff, and honestly in the future I think something we might see on Ishtar on skill 1 or skill 3 is a 20% buff success rate just for herself or the entire party, because that's what they actually gave to Skahawk to make Skahawk's first skill more guaranteed, and I'm thinking we might see something like that in the future for Ishtar. Finally, there's her third skill. This is actually kind of crazy, because what this is it's a delayed buff on a 3-turn cooldown. And what it does is you pop the skill on the turn, and then the next turn you get a 50% attack buff for that turn, and then because it's on such a low cooldown, you just gotta wait the next turn we have nothing, and then boom, it's back up again. So really with Ishtar, as long as you're managing this third skill, you are getting insanely high damage. In fact, with this third skill up, out of all of the AoE Buster Archers, she just hits the hardest. Now, that's not taking into account people like Napoleon or Gilgamesh's special damage mods, but the funny thing is that even with their special damage mods up, as long as Ishtar has this up, she can actually still somewhat compete with their NP damage. And this is actually why Ishtar was kind of hard for a lot of players to use in the first year of FGO, because managing this third skill was apparently just too hard for people. I don't really know why. You literally just use it the turn before you want to fire her NP, and with her having very strong arts cards and having a 50% battery, you can pretty much manage when you want to fire your NP, so I don't really see why it's that big of a deal. But it's a very, very strong skill for Ishtar, and really, when you look at all three of her skills, you basically have a servant that has a little bit of party utility, has a 50% battery, which is cracked, a way to give herself insane amounts of damage for one turn, and then has an 80% chance to be able to pierce pretty much any enemy defense and give herself invincibility for one turn, which is absolutely insane. Let's also not mention that her passives give her 42.5% innate debuff resistance because of her magic resistance and goddess essence skill, which means it's almost a coin flip for her to get debuff. So she's very good in challenge quests, because it's very hard to hit her with debuffs, but her NP is what ties it all together, because not only has it been buffed to give it more natural damage, but it actually drops 20 stars for her to play around with, which is insane because she's an archer, and even though she doesn't have a star weight skill, because she's an archer, her natural star weight is absolutely insane, and it's basically going to guarantee that she's going to absorb all the stars for herself, unless you're running that Ozymandias combo where Ozymandias being a rider might compete for stars, but still, Ozymandias in that scenario also generates stars every single turn, so it really doesn't matter at that point. So that's already really insane. But then she also has a 20 to 60% buster buff that procs first whenever she fires her NP. So keep in mind, you have a very big attack buff multiplying into her buster buff, and that's why she hits so hard. Because different buff types in FGO do not add into each other, they multiply into each other. The buffs are multiplicative. And so when you have different buff types, you get so much more damage out of it. And so overall, what it just equates to Ishtar being is just this giant beat stick of a character. And that's why I kind of call her generic, quote unquote, because she's not doing anything super crazy unique or that's super hard to understand. You kind of just throw Ishtar at people and she blows them up. And so in that vein, she's very, very good. And then she's even pretty good for farming as well, because even without her third skill, her damage is very solid. And then on turn 2, before you go into the last third wave, you pop her third skill and you just get insane amounts of more damage stacked onto Ishtar, and then she just completely obliterates the third wave. And then even if for whatever reason you didn't kill with the NP, you at least guarantee have at least 20 stars for her to do some follow-up crits with. And so it just makes her very effective for challenge quests, for being able to burst down opponents, and very strong for farming because she pretty much just obliterates everything. And one of the strategies for farming is that if you can't clear, is to kill with your face cards afterwards, and the fact that she guarantees stars just makes that easier to guarantee crits. So do I recommend you summon for Ishtar? I mean, personally, I would hoard all my Saint Quartz on JP, because JP is one of those games where we don't have any clairvoyance, we have no idea what's coming up. The next servant could be like Rasputin, it could be Solomon, it could be someone absolutely crazy, it could be the beast version of Nero for all we know. Who knows what they're doing on the JP version of the game? It could finally be the Tsukihime collab. You just never know what's coming next. So I generally try to save my Saint Quartz as much as possible on the JP version of the game, but this is just overall a very strong banner. Like, if you just need a good Lancer or a good Archer, this Ereshkigal Ishtar banner is so strong, especially because they're both limited servants. So it's just a very good opportunity to get either one. I understand they're both very popular as well. It's like very hard for me to say, don't summon on this banner if you like Ereshkigal or Ishtar, because it's not like there's some schmuck units that aren't good at all whatsoever. They're both very, very strong. So I can't just tell you to not summon for them if you really want them. So just final bit of advice to kind of just give a summary to what I'm saying. If you like the servants and you really want them, go ahead and summon for them. They're definitely worth summoning for. But I would advise you, if you're on the fence, to save your Saint Quartz, because you never know what's around the corner. It might be some absolutely busted, broken servant. Now, with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace, late guys.